In my study for the boy crisis of the shooters, the mass shooters, I found that almost all of the mass shooters are dad-deprived boys, whether it was Nicholas Cruz at Parkland or Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook or Robert Bowers at the synagogue shooting, and on, Dylan Roof, and of course the deadliest mass shooting in recent history, Stephen Paddock, is a fascinating story of anger at a dad that was depriving him of access to his fatherhood. And then I looked at ISIS recruits and found that almost all the ISIS recruits had in common that they were dad-deprived boys, and the smaller percentage of ISIS recruits that are female, they are almost all dad-deprived as well. Then I looked at prisoners, and the prison population, most of us know, is about 93% male, but what I didn't know was that 93% male prison population is almost all dad-deprived males.
All right, we have our guest. Okay, nice. I have talked to this man for many decades now, best-selling author, and that is Warren Farrell. Warren Farrell's last book is now out in paperback. He is a serious thinker. I know him for many years, and I'm glad we finally got you. I hope there was, is everything okay? Was there just a glitch? What happened, Warren?
There was some type of technical glitch, but it's fine. We're here, and we're connected, and the only thing I have problems with is there being too many decades. We've been alive and doing this, but we certainly, I so appreciate you and the depth of thinking that you bring to this world.
That's very kind of you. He is chair of the commission to create a White House Council on Boys and Men. It's a very interesting story of Warren Farrell. He was the only male member of New York's National Organization for Women?
You have a really good memory. Yeah, I was on the board of NOW in New York City and was the only man elected 3 times to the board of NOW, and pretty much spoke all around the world on the importance of women's issues. And I still, support women's freedom and the expansion of their opportunities. But I came to understand that there was a great deal of antagonism toward men and an undervaluing of the family. And as I started to protest that and do research that showed that children, when I did the research for the boy crisis, I basically found that in all 63 of the developed nations where the boy crisis was occurring, and what the developed nations had in common was a lot of permission for divorce, and it was the children of divorce that had minimal or no father involvement. That's where the boy crisis resided, and it also resided where among the children of mothers under 30, in the United States, 53% of women under 30 who have children without being married, and it was in that second category.
All right. We're going to continue. He is worried about boys. He's right. The book is The Boy Crisis. The paperback edition is now out.
The Dennis Prager Show.
All right, everybody, really important book, The Boy Crisis. Warren Farrell started out as a male feminist, I think that's fair to say, as the only man on the New York NOW, National Organization for Women board, and has now, and tell me if this is completely fair, and has now come to the belief that the greater crisis is with regard to males. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say, and and this is really not just the United States crisis, but a global crisis, as I was mentioning before break. And it really is a crisis with the children born to out of wedlock of women, especially under 30. And in that group, there's the very great majority of those children do not know their fathers. And while that's been very challenging for the daughters, it is significantly more challenging for boys who don't have any role model at all, and for boys who don't know how, without a dad, often feel abandoned by the dad and don't know really who they are. And boys have much greater challenges. One of the things I discovered in doing the research for the boy crisis is that in every time there's an emotional breakup, boys and men have more challenges with that than girls and women do. Even when males are older and there's a divorce, men are 10 times as likely to commit suicide after a divorce as women are. And you see this at breakups in high schools and colleges and romances. Boys have more trouble dealing with that. And so I just began to look much more carefully at what the data said and found that girls are doing very well for the most part recently. Girls without fathers are having significant problems, but no one is having more challenges than boys who are what I call dad deprived.
I wonder if it's related. I'm curious to get your reaction. This is spontaneously arose in my mind just now. More and more, and I don't think it's because obviously everybody's getting older, but I theoretically should have gotten this comment as much as I do now 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But it is fascinating to me how frequently younger men will say, Dennis, you're a father figure to me. And I wonder if it's related in many instances to the absence of a father figure.
I would say absolutely. There is an enormous amount of hunger among boys for someone to lead them constructively. And what I found is that when boys grow up in single mom households and they go from the single mom household to a school in which there's mostly females in grammar, kindergarten through 5th, 6th, 7th grade, the boys often feel that they have no constructive male role models, no Dennis Pragers, if you will. And those are the boys who are very vulnerable to the authoritarian personalities of a gang leader or a drug dealer saying you can have reputation, you can have identity, just do it my way, I'll tell you what to do. And that type of commanding personality becomes someone that makes a boy is vulnerable to. And then when he finds a constructive personality and a thoughtful personality and somebody who has a sense of self, like yourself, that's really appealing to boys, but many boys never get to that level of squeezing through the dangers to somebody who's a constructive leader. And one of the things I suggest in the boy crisis is that that especially for boys that are being raised in single mom families, it's very important for those boys to have a faith-based community that they're connected to, particularly other boys that they can, particularly faith-based leaders who are organizing groups of boys their son's age to connect with and talk with and have the boys be able to see beyond the masks that they wear to project strength to other boys, when almost always men's strength is their facade, men's weakness is their facade of strength, and that mask is making them all feel lonely and isolated. And you see this in so many crucial ways. In my study for the boy crisis of the shooters, the mass shooters, I found that almost all of the mass shooters are dad-deprived boys, whether it was Nicholas Cruz at Parkland or Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook or Robert Bowers at the synagogue shooting, and on, Dylan Roof, and of course the deadliest mass shooting in recent history, Stephen Paddock, is a fascinating story of anger at a dad that was depriving him of access to his fatherhood. And then I looked at ISIS recruits and found that almost all the ISIS recruits had in common that they were dad-deprived boys, and the smaller percentage of ISIS recruits that are female, they are almost all dad-deprived as well. Then I looked at prisoners, and the prison population, most of us know, is about 93% male, but what I didn't know was that 93% male prison population is almost all dad-deprived males.
What you just said, I feel like I should play every single day on the radio. That's how important I consider it. I did not know about the shooters. I had some sense of it. I did not know specifically, and I did not know about ISIS. And yet, I don't know if you know this. This is where I do a lot of research. The New York Times had a series of pieces about 2 years ago. I spoke about them on the air, about how fathers are not necessary.
Yes. It is truly unbelievable. It has been unbelievable to see the New York Times that I have subscribed to every day since I was in the 7th grade has become really a feminist. Is controlled by feminist thinking. When I was on the board of NOW, there was not a single op-ed that I ever wrote for the New York Times that was rejected. They were all printed. And then when I started to express points of view that were empathetic to men and to boys, every single one of my op-eds of the next 28 op-eds were rejected.
I'd like to play that every day on my radio show. You can speak to Warren Farrell, who is intellectually honest and comes from a good place and has a lot of knowledge. You can speak to him by calling 1-8-PRAGER-776. I'm going to let the other calls about the politics let them go. Talk to you another day. This boy crisis is the absence of fathers. By the way, I mentioned this comment that so many men make to me that I'm a father figure to them, and I just want you to know that I am honored deeply by it. It is a beautiful statement. I am proud to be that, and I always say every man should aspire to be a father figure to other men. So that, I was only noting that I think a lot of people don't have a father who is a father figure. 1-8-PRAGER-776. The book is The Boy Crisis.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Okay, everybody. Dennis Prager here with Warren Farrell. It's impossible to overstate the crisis with males. And he has done it. And remember, he started out as he put his actions where his sentiments were. He was a member of the board of the National Organization for Women, the only male member of the New York chapter. But he now realizes, as I think it's clear, this notion of the absent father, which is a crisis of unimaginable proportions, the number of men I know, this is what's so amazing. I mean, every one of us knows a very small number of people, right? I mean, given how many people there are in the world, what do we know in any degree of intimacy? 50 people? In the world that I know, which is bigger than the average because I'm a public figure, but still obviously very small, it is astonishing how many men I know who after divorce were deprived of their child by an angry ex-spouse. Is my experience with this atypical or not?
I wish I could say it was atypical, but it is very typical. When children are interviewed 5 years after divorce, and they're asked, did your mother ever badmouth your father? Did your father ever badmouth your mother? They find that only 11% of children say that neither parent badmouthed the other, but they're 5 times as likely to say that only the mom badmouthed the dad versus the dad badmouthing the mom.
Where is that study? Forgive me, I really want to know, where is that study?
I just cited in the Boy Crisis book, but it's originally by Glynis Walker, Walker, and she was a liberal woman who did a study on this, expecting to find not the findings she found, but was honest enough to report those findings.
Go on.
And so and when a boy looks in the mirror and he sees that and he sees the same body language and nose and eyes and hair that his dad has, and he hears that his dad was a liar or irresponsible or a narcissist, and he says, well, gee, I am looking in the mirror, maybe I'm a narcissist too, and maybe I relied to somebody, etc. And he begins to fear that he is that this is what he is about, and then he's angry that his dad has abandoned him. Oftentimes the dad protects him from knowing that he's fighting in court to have the right to be with him, and so there's an enormous damage among these boys. But I think the damage that isn't understood nearly effectively enough is there's about 9 differences between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting, and almost no one knows these differences, and therefore they don't know what is the value of a dad in a child's life. So, for example, dads are far more likely to roughhouse with their children, and say they have 3 children, and they'll throw the 3 kids on the couch and tell the kids, okay, your job is to jump on my back and pin me down before I pin the 3 of you down together. And the mom is looking at this and thinking, my God, I feel like I have just one more child to monitor in the dad. And then she's feeling like, I don't want to over control the situation, and these kids seem to be having fun, but I just know that sooner or later they're going to, somebody's going to hurt somebody else, and there's going to be somebody crying. And sure enough, she's right. And then she's even more shocked when the dad says, okay, you can't, sweetie, you can't poke your elbow in your sister's face. That's not fair, but you can do this. You can use leverage, etc. And so then the dad goes back to the roughhousing, and the mom is saying, wait a minute, you just saw the kids cried and had problems with this, and now you're returning to the same process that led to the children crying? Now I know I have one more child to monitor in you. And so, but what the dads don't explain is what they're teaching the children to do is to, first of all, they're creating a bond with the child that makes the child not resentful about paying attention to the dad. Second, the father is helping them distinguish between what's assertive and what's aggressive. He's requiring them to think about their sisters and brothers' feelings, not just their own feelings, in order to get what they want, which is the continuation of the roughhousing. And then, usually, all good dads, when the child is in this situation of experiencing emotional intelligence under fire and has just agreed that they will think of their sister's feelings, but then again, when they're so excited in the moment, they go back and they repeat the same old patterns of thinking only of themselves. Then dads usually stop the roughhousing and say, "Okay, I warned you. No more roughhousing till tomorrow night." Oh, Dad.
Okay, hold on there. Hold on. I want to hear that. All right. Is Warren Farrell's book, The Boy Crisis, is up. 1-8-PRAGER-776. Okay, everybody. Dennis Prager here. Warren Farrell. The book is up at DennisPrager.com. And it's very sobering stuff, The Boy Crisis. And what you cited, I knew it. This is an example I want to say to my listeners. Folks, I am very, very, very careful about the most precious thing we have, and that's truth. And I will not say something unless I am as certain as can be of its truth. And when I speak about the great number of boys being alienated from their fathers, and sometimes, of course, it happens the other way, that women are alienated from their daughter or child by a father, but overwhelmingly it's more in the other direction. And now the statistics are shown the devastation caused on both sexes, but particularly on boys. And there's just no men in their life, as you pointed out, and I have. They go to school, almost all their teachers are female. Their principal is female. Their therapist is just as likely to be female. If they even go to church, their clergy person is 50-50 likely to be a female. And boys need male models. I know the older I get, the more grateful I am to my father. That's what he provided more than anything. He was not particularly warm. He was not affectionate. He was not doting in any possible way. He was very strict, but I had such a strong model of a man, of a good, decent man, and it had such an impact on me. So this is what among the many things he's writing about. What are the data now on the ratio of females in college to males?
It's now 60 to 40 that graduate from college. It's a little bit less that enter into the college to begin with, and of course it used to be the other way around. It was about 60-40, and in the 70s it was about 60% men and 40% women. And one of the challenges there is it was really understandable in the 70s when it was 60-40 the other way that we had that women were given special scholarships and affirmative action opportunities and special opportunities for entering college. But now that the situation is reversed, we're seeing very few scholarships from predominantly for males or to help males get involved in the health professions or in professions that are growing very quickly, like the health professions, but have a minority of males in it.
Why isn't this perceived as well as a female crisis? Most women want to marry, but they generally want to marry up socioeconomically and educationally.
Well, this is exactly what I am saying in the Boy Crisis book. I'm saying that, whenever either sex wins, both sexes lose. That the great majority of our daughters are heterosexual, and and exactly as you said, they're not interested in marrying men, especially when they have children. It's very rare that a woman who wants children is going to marry a man who's reading "I'm okay, you're okay" in the unemployment line. But he's very sensitive, and if a woman is wanting children and meets a man at a party, and he says, I'm interested in being a full-time dad, one part of her likes that. Another part of her is likely to not return for a drink and maybe refer him to the journalist at a party to do a story on, but it's not of interest to her. And so we have this enormous, and all of this is really a challenge for us because many women say that they'd like to be a have-it-all woman, and they can be a have-it-all woman if men were also socialized to feel like father warriors if they were full-time dads and involved in that way. There are men who have that type of personality, and there are women who have the personality to be sort of very deeply involved in the workplace. But the women who are very deeply involved in the workplace are usually wanting men who are even earning more than they do in the workplace. And so the men who are potentially able to care for children and oriented in that direction, personality-wise, are sort of left out of the process, and the children are left without a dad and without oftentimes a mother when the mother is more devoted to her work, and there's nobody devoted to the children. And so that's I think before break we were talking about this difference between dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting, and one of those differences that I was talking about with the roughhousing is the difference of dads being willing to enforce boundaries, not set boundaries. Moms and dads pretty much set boundaries about equally in the same way. They both say, you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas. The children challenge boundaries in the same way. They say, okay, I had a few more peas, now can I have my ice cream? The difference is that moms are more likely to see that, gee, it's been a tough day. I'm not going to get into a big battle over a few peas. So, okay, sweetie, tell you what, have this many more peas, and then you can have your ice cream. So the kid has, half that number of peas, and then says, okay, I had more peas. Can I have my ice cream? And mom says, okay. So the kid learns that with mom, I can manipulate a better deal. With dad, like your dad, dad is more likely to say, excuse me, we have a deal here. The deal is you finish your peas and you get your ice cream. And so with dad, the children learn that they cannot manipulate a better deal. Therefore, the children need to focus their attention on doing what they need to do rather than getting what they want to have. And the result of that is that the children raised predominantly by dads are only half as likely to have ADHD as children raised predominantly by moms.
Wow.
15% versus 30%, because the children know that with dads there's no option but attention focus rather than attention deficit.
Okay, my friend, you do very important work. Are you working on a new book?
I'm actually I'm spending more time right now just promoting this. I feel so committed to the Boy Crisis book that I feel like I spent 11 years researching it and writing it, and I wanted to, trying to connect with the presidential candidates to talk with them about either getting President Trump to create a White House Council on Boys and Men so that the boys and men's issues are brought to the national agenda. And so that's my next.
Your former allies will probably oppose it. Thank you, my friend. It's a very important work you're doing. Warren Farrell, the book is The Boy Crisis. And I'm not associating him with my following statement. Okay? Just from Dennis. Everything the left touches, they ruin. Now it's boys.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Hey, you want a solution to a lot of these things that are happening, my friends? It's called Prager University. That's right. We're changing minds. We're making people aware. And some of the joy, a big part of the joy I have, are the Prager Force students, thousands of them all over the world, in universities and in high schools, who bring our ideas and our videos to other students. Dee Dee in Los Angeles. Dennis Prager, hi.
Hi, Dennis.
Hello, Dee Dee.
I just wanted to make a comment. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yep, I'm all ears. Yes,
okay.
I can.
Pleasure to talk to you, an honor.
Can you hear
me?
me?
To tell you that,
Thank you.
I can. So I wanted to mention that everything that you're saying about the universities, what a waste of money because they're just turning our kids into leftists. It's happening lower in the lower grades. My kids go to a very expensive school in Los Angeles, private school, and it's the same thing. They're trying to make them little activists. They're pushing an agenda. I'm extremely sensitive to it because I listen to you all the time. But it used to be a very, very conservative school. And I see things all the time that they're pushing the leftist agenda and trying to make the kids into activists, into leaders, into, you gotta take a side and you gotta take a stand. It's to the point where I'm scared to even say anything because I don't want repercussions on my kids.
Well, you're right. So why do you continue? And I really want to hear your answer. Why do you continue to send them to the school?
It's a very good question, and I'm questioning it myself. As you know, there's not a whole lot of good alternatives. I can't homeschool them.
Well, the best.
Where would I go?
Well, wait a minute. Okay, I'll tell you where. There are three places that immediately come to mind. What is your religion? Do you have any religion?
I am Jewish.
Dee Dee? Okay. So I'm sure you're not Orthodox, and this will be an odd suggestion, but an Orthodox Jewish school, or for that matter, a traditional Christian school or homeschool. The schools today in Los Angeles and any major urban center are a waste. Their task is not to teach. How old is your kid? How old is your kid?
8th grader and a 12th grader.
Okay. Ask the 8th grader, is it a he or a she?
A she.
Ask her the following. Ask her what she knows about global warming. And then ask her, does she know the difference between IT' and ITS?
Okay.
Do you understand the purpose of my question?
The it's? No, I don't understand the it's.
The purpose of my question, yes, I believe they're learning almost nothing at these schools except to be a leftist. So they are learning about sexism and racism, and ask her what she knows about George Washington. That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Ask her, was George Washington a great man? Ask her that.
She knows more than
I'd be
most
shocked if she said yes.
I brought her to your town hall last year. She enjoyed it very much.
How did she react?
So, pardon?
All right, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. All right. This is, I feel for parents today. My heart breaks for you. My heart breaks for you. What you risk, the character of your child being at risk if you send them to a regular school or college. I'm going to go to my guest in a moment. I want to remind you about one of the groups that keeps shows like mine in business. For that alone, you should join AMAC. It's extremely inexpensive. I don't know. The last I saw was $16. It might be $20. I'll have to check again. For membership, anybody 50 or over who joins AARP is supporting a left-wing group. If you support AMAC, then you are supporting a non-left-wing group, conservative group. It's as simple as that. You want great benefits, you get great benefits on everything from car insurance to hotels to so much more, travel. But you are supporting an organization that fights for the values that I fight for. Go to PragerForAMAC.com. Please do this. It's very good for the society. It's very good for you. It's very good for the show. 855-624-0163, AMAC.com. 855-624-0163, PragerForAMAC.com. This man is one of my favorites when I talk about economics with Andy Puzder. And he's the former CEO of Hardee's and Carl's Jr. restaurants. He teaches the newest PragerU video, Socialism versus Capitalism. In 2 days, it has 1.5 million views. His newest book is The Capitalist Comeback. Andy, Real Clear Politics picked up your video, which is a big deal because they just take the best of left and right. Yeah, it's very nice
PragerU too.
Well, thank you. You know what is amazing? When I step back, I'm a big picture guy. And the big picture to me is, who would have predicted 50 years ago that Americans would have to defend capitalism to Americans?
I would say nobody would. Matter of fact, if you remember, back in the 1991 when the Soviet Union fell, and we all thought that finally economic reality had prevailed and people would realize that capitalism was a far superior system, that the big joke at the time was that the only place you could find a socialist was the faculty lounge at Harvard. And now that's changed. Obviously, those people in the faculty lounge were able to expand their beliefs well beyond Harvard. But it is a surprise that in this day and age, particularly with the economic success that President Trump is having implemented capitalist policies on the heels of Obama's socialist-oriented big government policies, the current economic success we're having, you would think, would convince people to just ignore these socialists, but they get a lot of airtime.
I have my theories. Well, I'd like to know if you have a theory, and if you don't, you don't. But if you do, I'd like to hear it. Why would intellectuals gravitate toward socialism when it verifiably never produces wealth and only capitalism has lifted people from poverty?
I think people that believe in socialism, there's really kind of two classes. One class is people that just aren't educated. They just don't understand what socialism is. They don't understand what it does. They don't know the historical results. And in fact, that includes a huge percentage of America's youth. There was a poll in 2017 that found that 69% of millennials were unable to accurately define either socialism or capitalism. So you've got a lot of people out there that just don't understand either economic theory. The second group of people who do understand it are these liberal academics, and I think they are just uncomfortable with a system that isn't somehow controlled. In other words, there aren't these elite smart people like them, they're the intellectuals that are controlling the economy. Rather, it's consumers that control it. It's consumers that make life and death decisions about whether companies survive or don't survive. It's consumers that vote with every dollar they spend with whether BlackBerry succeeds or Apple succeeds. That makes them uncomfortable because there isn't the kind of definitive, elitist, intellectual class controlling, the rest of us who obviously don't really know what we're doing. And I think that makes them ill at ease, and so it tends to make them socialist. It's now I could be dead wrong about that, but you asked what my opinion was.
No, you're actually, you know what? No, on the contrary, Andy, what I was thinking was, and this is not meant to insult businessmen, because it's true for any group, most people are not deep thinkers. It's just not an insult. It's just a fact. And whether it is doctors or lawyers or businessmen or anybody else, truck drivers, it's blue collar, white collar, it doesn't matter. And you are. That is, I think, one of the key reasons, because under capitalism, people can choose to pay baseball players more than professors. And this drives them crazy.
Yeah, that's
exactly
true.
The freedom that you were mentioning.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
They really just don't grasp. I mean, capitalism is very simple in the sense that the way you succeed in a capitalist economy is that you satisfy other people's needs. In other words, when I ran Carl's and Hardee's, we were always trying to figure out what other people wanted to eat. We weren't trying to figure out what we wanted to eat. We were trying to figure out what other people wanted to eat so we could provide it to them. And that's true of every product you see in the grocery store that sits in the Amazon warehouse. Everyone represents an entrepreneur with a very simple thought. How can I meet the needs of other people at a price they can afford? With socialism, it's very different. You have to meet the needs of the elites. If you want to succeed in North Korea or Venezuela today, you've got to meet the needs of Kim Jong-un and his ilk, or Maduro and his ilk. And it's a very different strategy. It's sort of instead of aiming people out at the needs of other people, what you do in socialism, you aim them in at your needs, because you want to get the most for yourself, and the needs of this elitist class. And it's a system that just plain produces poverty, misery, and want, because you're focused inward, as opposed to capitalism, where you're focused outward and you produce great prosperity and great diversity.
Exactly. All right, back in a moment with Andy Puzder, and his video is up at PragerU.com. Dennis Prager here, and I'm speaking to Andy Puzder, former CEO of Hardee's and Carl's Jr. Restaurants. Teaches the newest PragerU course, Socialism versus Capitalism. These are exactly the things that we get into young people's hands. 1 billion views last year. We're among the most powerful forces in the world trying to undo the left-wing disaster, the moral disaster, economic disaster of the left. We can only do it with funds from people. So this is March is fundraising month for Prager University. They're tax deductible, your donations. Click at the banner at DennisPrager.com or visit PragerU.com or call 833-PragerU. You have been magnificent in the past. We are making an impact, so I don't have to sell you on what we're doing. People like Andy Puzder are making these awesome videos. What do they answer when... I should know this answer, and I don't. And I'm not sure you would. What do they answer to the charge that capitalism produces money and socialism spends it? How is socialism going to produce wealth? What would their answer be?
They really never argue that socialism produces wealth. They more argue that it produces justice, that there's economic equality. Now, what they never point out is that it's the economic equality of poverty. Whereas in a capitalist society, you have economic inequality, but everybody is materially better off. It's that rising tide that lifts all boats that John Kennedy talked about, where economic growth in a capitalist economy helps the poor, the middle class, the working class, the upper class. In a socialist economy, the argument is everybody's equal. Everybody will have the same benefits. And the idea, of course, is that they'll, at least what they try and sell you, is that those benefits will be substantial, that everybody will be lifted up. It never happens because the economies never produce enough wealth to even feed anybody, which is why they always have these bread lines, these food lines. But that's the idea. They're not trying to sell the idea of wealth. They're trying to sell the idea of justice and equality, even though it's the justice and equality of poverty and misery.
Right. So they don't have an answer. That's right. They rather have people equally poor. Andy, congratulations on another great video.
Oh, thanks for letting me do.
Thank you so much. All right. Sorry. I gotta take a break. All right, everybody. Please, it's a perfect time. Call 833-PragerU or go to PragerU.com or the banner on my website. We are doing good work, really good work. And help us. Male-female hour coming up. I'm Dennis Prager.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
Capitalism versus socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No. Wrong. So wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I'll prove it to you. Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others. No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others. Now, I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch. The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend. In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper? Of course, this isn't a problem for those who have the right connections with the right people. Those chosen few get whatever they want. But everyone else is out of luck. Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch. Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. We'll ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success right up until it wasn't. But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies? People seem pretty happy there. Why can't we have what they have? Free healthcare, free college, stronger unions. Good question, and the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States. The only difference, and it's a big one, is that they offer more government benefits than the U.S. does. We can argue about the cost of these benefits and the point at which they reduce individual initiative, thus doing more harm than good. Scandinavians have been debating those questions for years. But only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy. To get the free stuff, after all, you have to create enough wealth to generate enough tax revenue to pay for everything the government gives away. Without capitalism, you're Venezuela. In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's prime minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the U.S. associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. So when you point to Denmark as a paragon of socialism, you're really singing the praises of capitalism. The more capitalism, the less socialism you need. Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier. Unemployment, notably among minority groups typically most at risk for poverty, is at a generational low. Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism. None of this requires a degree in economics. Common sense is all you need. That's why it's so frustrating to see young people praising socialism and criticizing capitalism. It's bad enough that they're working against their own interests, better job prospects, better wages, personal freedom. But they're also working against the interest of the less fortunate. Capitalism leads to economic democracy. Socialism leads to the economic dictatorship of the elite. Always and everywhere. So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Venezuela's economic crisis has made headlines all over the world for the past few years. Hunger is widespread there. Unable to afford the small amount of food available in supermarkets, many Venezuelans have reported to eating garbage to survive. Even zoo animals in Venezuela are starving, according to a report by the Daily Mail, and people have been breaking into zoos to eat them. A recent survey found that the food crisis has also created an education crisis, as more than 1 million children no longer attend school, mostly due to hunger and a lack of public services. Moises Rendon and Mark L. Schneider of the Center for Strategic and International Studies provide a bleak assessment of Venezuela's current situation, saying the country is suffering an unprecedented man-made humanitarian crisis. They say Venezuela resembles a country at war and note some of its major social problems, including extreme food and medicine shortages, rampant crimes in every city, constant electric blackouts, and looting and repression. When you see and hear these stories, you can't help but wonder what went wrong. How could a country that was once most of the affluent countries in South America reach such a sorry state? One source of the misery in Venezuela is its out-of-control inflation, which we will examine in this episode of the Infographic Show, Venezuelan Hyperinflation Explained. Before we discuss Venezuelan hyperinflation, let's begin with a discussion of what hyperinflation is in general. Simply put, hyperinflation is a very high, rapid, and continuous inflation. In a hyperinflation situation, the prices of goods and services in an economy quickly rise to a level so high that they become difficult to afford for most people. While experts cannot agree what that exact level is, economist Michael K. Salimi states that hyperinflation is generally used to describe episodes when the monthly inflation rate is greater than 50%. He gives an example that at a monthly rate of 50%, an item that cost $1 on January 1st would cost $130 on January 1st of the following year. The hyperinflation in Venezuela is significantly more than the rate cited by Salimi. According to an August 2018 BBC article, prices of goods have been doubling every 26 days on average, and the annual inflation rate reached 83,000% in July. One source reported that a cup of coffee cost 450 bolivars in Venezuela less than 2 years ago. Earlier this year, it cost a shocking 2.5 million bolivars. But wildly high prices are not the only serious effect of hyperinflation. As a Guardian article notes, the problem comes when the supply of paper money in an economy outstrips demand for goods and services, causing the value of the currency to fall. Following in the footsteps of Zimbabwe, Venezuela turned to increasing its money supply because it had no other means to pay its debts, as we shall see later. But ultimately, Venezuela ended up in its current hyperinflation situation due to a combination of several factors. Number 3. High government spending. President Hugo Chavez ran Venezuela from 1999 until his death in 2013. Chavez and his administration implemented social programs called the Bolivarian missions that were supposed used to improve living conditions for the poor by redistributing the wealth and reforming the way land was used. There was also an attempt to promote economic democratization through the establishment of worker-owned cooperatives. Data from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, or CEPR, indicates that Chavez achieved a high degree of success with these programs. He was able to reduce unemployment from 14.5% in 1999 to 7.8% in 2011. The poverty rate also dropped from 50% in 1999 to 31.9% in 2011, while extreme poverty dropped from 19.9% to 8.6% in 2011. Unfortunately, this prosperity came at a high financial cost. The social programs were good for the people but bad for the economy. Chavez spent more money on these social programs than the country could really afford. According to CNBC, public spending accounted for more than 50% of Venezuela's GDP in 2012. He also borrowed money from other countries to keep the programs going. By 2013, Venezuela's foreign debt climbed to a little over $106 billion. According to one source, Chavez had been warned about the growing fiscal deficit as early as 2002, but he didn't pay attention to the warnings. For Chavez, these social programs were a way to win over the people. Maintaining his popularity with the people was important to him because it was a way for him to maintain his power. An article in The Economist states that through the Bolivarian missions and the flood of oil money, he was able to rebuff a referendum in 2004 that would have removed him from office. To make matters worse, Chavez and his administration failed to save money for future economic crises, which quickly emerged due to an event that happened in 2014. Number 2. Low oil prices. Venezuela's economy is mainly based on selling only one commodity, oil. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. The World Atlas states that it has 300,878 billion barrels of proven reserves. According to Oil Sands magazine, most of Venezuela's proved oil reserves are located in the Orinoco Petroleum Belt, which is located on the eastern Orinoco River basin. The Orinoco Belt is approximately 370 miles in length and has an area of about 21,357 square miles. It is estimated that the area contains about 1.2 trillion barrels of oil. Another oil-rich area in the country is the area near Lake Maracaibo, which is actually a brackish tidal bay that is located near the Caribbean Sea. One source estimates that the lake's basin supplies about 2/3 of the total Venezuelan output. With the discovery of oil in Venezuela in the early 1900s, the country relied more and more on it as a revenue source. Today, Venezuela derives over 50% of its GDP from petroleum exports, which represents about 95% of total exports. According to a Forbes article, this meant that when oil prices were high, life was good. For instance, Venezuelans enjoyed a high standard of living when oil prices spiked in the 1960s and 1970s. An online magazine called ForeignPolicy.com describes how Venezuela was considered rich in the early 1960s. It produced more than 10% of the world's crude and had a per capita GDP many times bigger than that of its neighbors, Brazil and Colombia, and not far behind that of the United States. Conversely, when oil prices went low, life was bad, and this is what happened to Venezuela starting in 2014. That year, the price of oil dropped sharply from $100 to about $70 a barrel, and the price decline continued to a low of around $33 a barrel in early 2016, according to the American Institute for Economic Research, or AIER. The slump in oil prices sent Venezuela into an economic downward spiral. Lower oil prices brought with it a reduction of Venezuela's foreign reserves, and AIER states that this in turn reduced the government's ability to subsidize basic goods and services for its people. Number 1. Continuing economic mismanagement. The Venezuelan government, now under the control of Chavez's successor, Nicolás Maduro, dealt with the budget gap the way other countries in a similar situation did in the past when they had no other way to pay their debts: print money. AIER notes that printing money set the wheels in motion for hyperinflation. The budget shortfall was closed by printing money. Hyperinflation took hold, destroying the savings of individuals and making productive business investment nearly impossible. A comment made by a nurse named Magolita Oranos helps you understand what living with hyperinflation is like for the average citizen living in Venezuela. In an interview with The Guardian, she says, "We are millionaires, but we are poor. We can just about eat, but if some health emergency happens, we'll die because the prices of medicines are sky high and rise every day." According to economist Theodore Cangaro, hyperinflation continues under Maduro because he is continuing the disastrous economic policies of the late President Chavez. Earlier this year, Reuters reported that Maduro seemed to be in denial about Venezuela's hyperinflation. In an interview with Reuters, Rodrigo Cabeza, Hugo Chavez's former finance minister, said that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has refused to recognize the country's hyperinflationary problem and has no plan to address it. Now it seems that he's come up with a course of action. President Maduro has decided to play games with the value of Venezuela's dying bolivar currency in a desperate effort to give the appearance that hyperinflation is disappearing from his country. The Peterson Institute for International Economics, or PI, outlines his current plans for the bolivar. His proposed monetary reform has 3 pillars. 1, slash 5 zeros from prices, so a product that costs 100,000 bolivars would now cost 1 bolivar, and give the currency a different name, the sovereign bolivar. 2, devalue the currency by 95%, and 3, peg the bolivar to the petro, Venezuela's digital currency backed by oil, introduced in February 2018. He then plans to combine these monetary reforms with yet another round of questionable government interventions. CNBC reports that he will hike the minimum wage by over 3,000%, boost the corporate tax rate, and increase highly subsidized gas prices in coming weeks. Pai and other economic experts are skeptical that these measures will work to reduce hyperinflation because they don't address the underlying problems that are causing the hyperinflation in the first place. Pai argues that there is no substantial fiscal reform in the works, no attempt to build dismantled institutions, and no announced shifts in economic policymaking. Pai even forecasts that Venezuela looks set to beat Zimbabwe, a country that managed to have an annualized inflation rate of 79 billion% in November 2008. The economists interviewed by CNBC also have a dire outlook for Maduro's monetary plan. They think that it will make hyperinflation in Venezuela even worse. Amid this aggressive devaluation and monetary expansions due to salaries and bonuses, we are expecting a much more aggressive stage of hyperinflation, all the more so in a context where the elimination of excessive money printing is not credible. The worst of all worlds, says Venezuelan economist Asdrubal Oliveros of consultancy Analytica. A large number of Venezuelans have decided that they no longer want to live in this world where all of the social gains of low poverty and low unemployment, recklessly brought by Hugo Chavez, have been wiped out by incompetent leadership, poor financial planning, and widespread corruption. They are fleeing from Venezuela in droves. According to The Guardian, nearly 2 million people have fled Venezuela's economic and political crisis since 2015. The exodus will continue unless some drastic monetary and political changes are made. How long do you think Venezuela's hyperinflation will last? What do you think needs to be done to fix it? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video called Why You Will Soon Be Eating Crickets and Other Insects. Thanks for watching, and as always, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.